Hello and welcome back to Soma Talks, a podcast where body and mind meet. My name is Agata, and in this episode, we will explore a concept that comes from ancient yogic philosophy, but is increasingly supported by modern psychology and neuroscience. That concept is Sankalpa, a word that can be translated as intention or a deep inner commitment aligned with who we truly are. But Sankalpa is not simply any kind of a goal. It is not the same as saying, I want to lose weight, I want to be successful, I want to be happier. Sankalpa is something much deeper because it is a direction for your nervous system. It is a message to your subconscious and the relationship between awareness and embodiment. So today we will explore where the idea of Sankalpa comes from historically, how intention affects the body and brain, what science says about intention and behavior, the psychosomatic dimension of intentions, and finally, how to create and practice your own Sankalpa. Because intention is not just something that you think, but it's something that your entire body and mind participate in. Firstly, what is Sankalpa? The word itself comes from Sanskrit. It is composed of two roots, san, meaning connection with the highest truth, and kalpa, meaning vow, rule, or commitment. So Sankalpa can be understood as a vow aligned with your deepest truth. In yogic traditions, Sankalpa appears in texts related to meditation, ritual, and yoga philosophy in general. It became especially known for the practice of yoga Nidra, popularized in the 20th century, and in that context, Sankalpa is introduced during deep relaxation states, when the mind is between wakefulness and sleep. Why? Because in those states, the subconscious mind becomes more receptive. Instead of forcing change through willpower, Sankalpa works by planting a seed in the deeper layers of the mind. And this idea appears not only in yoga philosophy. If we look across traditions, we find very similar concepts. In Buddhism, intention is central to karma. In Stoic philosophy, we see the idea of aligning one's inner orientation with reality. And in phenomenology, philosophers like Merleau-Ponty describe how consciousness is embodied and directional. Even in modern psychology, intention shapes perception and behavior. So Sankalpa is not mystical in the sense of being unrealistic. It is a refined way of working with attention, belief, and embodiment. Now let's move from philosophy to science. So what is the connection between intention and our brain? Modern neuroscience shows that intention influences perception, behavior, and even physiology. One important mechanism is called predictive processing. The brain is not simply reacting to the world, instead it constantly predicts what will happen next. Our beliefs, expectations, and intentions shape those predictions. This means the brain is always asking what is likely to happen and what should the body prepare for. If your internal orientation is constantly I am not capable, I always fail, I am unsafe, something bad would happen, your nervous system begins to organize itself around those predictions. This affects muscle tension, breathing patterns, hormonal responses, and attention. But when we consciously set an intention, we begin to update those predictions. Research in neuroscience shows that goal representation in the prefrontal cortex influences decision-making, attention, and even motor behavior. Another important concept is neuroplasticity. The brain literally reorganizes based on repeated thoughts, actions, and emotional states. Psychologist Donald Hebb famously summarized this idea by saying, neurons that fire together, wire together. So if a Sankalpa is repeated during states of deep relaxation, meditation, or embodiment practices, the brain may gradually encode it as a new pattern. This is why many contemplative traditions repeat intentions when the mind is calm and very receptive, not when we are stressed and forcing change. Then it is too late. Another topic is psychosomatics and intention. In Soma Talks, we explore the relationship between mind and body. And in fact, Sankalpa fits beautifully into this field. Psychosomatics studies how psychological processes influence physical health. We know today that thoughts and emotions can affect, for example, immune function, inflammations, pain perception, digestion, or cardiovascular activity. For example, studies in psychoneuroimmunology show that stress, belief, and emotional states influence immune responses. One of the most famous examples of mind-body influence is the placebo effect, for example. When people believe they are receiving treatment, their bodies often show real physiological changes. For example, pain decreases, dopamine is released. In other words, a belief can influence brain, which later influences our body. Sankalpa works through a very related but more intentional mechanism. Instead of an unconscious belief triggered by treatment, we consciously cultivate an internal orientation. But the key is that it must feel very authentic and embodied. If someone repeats an intention that feels fake, the nervous system does not integrate it. This is why Sankalpa is often framed not as a future goal, but as a present truth that is emerging. For example, instead of I will become confident, Sankalpa might be rather I am learning to trust myself, or I move through life with stability and openness. This allows the nervous system to recognize possibility rather than contradiction. There is also a large part of philosophy of intention that we will mention today. So let's take a moment to look at it. In Western philosophy, intention is deeply connected with the concept of agency, of acting, of behaving. Philosophers like Aristotle discussed telos, the idea that actions move toward an intrinsic purpose. More recently, phenomenologists explored how consciousness is always intentional, meaning that it is always directed towards something, towards some purpose, some goal. We never experience pure, neutral awareness. Our perception is shaped by orientation, our goal. Sankalpa can be seen as choosing this orientation through which we meet experience. Instead of being unconsciously driven by fear, habit, or conditioning, we consciously shape our direction. But importantly, Sankalpa is not control. It is not the same. It is rather alignment. Yoga philosophy often describes this as living according to Dharma, or one's deeper truth. So the question becomes, what intention aligns with who you truly are? Not who society expects you to be, not who your fears tell you to be, but something more honest, something that feels like home in the body, something that feels true and comfortable to you. How to create a Sankalpa? If you want to work with this concept, simplicity is a key. Traditionally, a Sankalpa has several qualities. It is short, it is positive, it is in the present tense, and it feels meaningful. Some examples might be, I trust the process of my life, for example. My body is a place of safety and wisdom, or I move through life with courage and compassion. Notice that these are not external achievements. They are qualities of being. To discover your Sankalpa, you can ask yourself, what quality do I want to cultivate in my life? What does my nervous system need to feel supported? What truth already exists within me, but needs reinforcement? Then try to express it in one clear sentence and allow it to evolve over time. As I already mentioned in this episode, the most powerful time to repeat your Sankalpa is during states of deep relaxation or meditation. For example, at the beginning or end of meditation, during yoga Nidra, before sleep, after breath work, or after some somatic practice. When a body is relaxed, the brain shifts towards another brainwave states. These states are associated with learning, memory, integration, and subconscious processing. Here we are talking about alpha and theta brainwaves. So the practice is simple. Pause, take a few slow breaths, feel your body. Then repeat your Sankalpa mentally with sincerity within. Not forcing it, not trying to convince yourself, just planting the seed in your mind. And over time, repetition allows the nervous system to reorganize around that orientation. Before we finish, remember that Sankalpa reminds us that transformation does not always begin with effort. Sometimes it begins with clarity, with something simple, a clear direction, a relationship with ourselves that is intentional rather than accidental. Our bodies are constantly listening to the stories we repeat internally. Sankalpa invites us to choose those stories consciously, not as illusions, but as pathways for growth, healing, and embodiment. Thank you for listening to this episode of Soma Talks today. I hope you enjoyed it, and feel free to share it with someone who might benefit from exploring the connection between body, mind, and awareness. And maybe take a moment today to also ask yourself, what intention is quietly waiting inside me? Thank you for being here, and until next time. Soma Talks, Agata Daras.